We're gonna call the meeting to order, and in order to have a forum, Sam, can you join us? You got it. Yeah, we're good. We're good. Thank you. We're gonna start the meeting. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so do we have a motion to accept the minutes of? Hey, Brian. Darryl for second. Paul.
Aye.
Okay, so we're gonna go right into the mental health community services, and Rob's here. Rob, can you join us? Sure. Thank you.
Morning.
Good morning.
Oh, no, sorry, that was for this over there, sorry.
We can share.
Let me give you some.
No, we're good. We can share.
Thanks, Stephen.
Getting to do that right. Thank you.
There you go.
Ready to go?
All right. Okay, so the first item I have on my agenda is a request to amend the 2023 Washington County budget in the amount of $60,926. This is to accept and pass through 100% state aid funds from the New York State Office of Mental Health. These funds were specifically designated for some minimum wage adjustments and supportive housing enhancements.
Second, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Okay, then just quickly, we are organizing that mental health facilities tour. And to thank Melissa, she really helped coordinate the logistics of it. I know it was kind of a feat to try to coordinate schedules. So we landed on a date.
June 12th.
June 12th.
At noon.
Noon. And what we're going to do is I think we have some kind of a vehicle.
Yeah, we have, I think, 7 people that want to go on the tour, including yourself. And we have contacted Carpool to get a car or van available.
Yeah. Right. And we'll just do a driving tour. It's sort of a natural route to leave the municipal center here, start up Route 4 through Hudson Falls, see some of the things in Hudson Falls, cut over into Warren County, come down Bay Road, and into Glens Falls. Have a whole list of facilities that we'll be able to see. We'll stop at a few of them and meet some of the staff, have a chance to chat. It might be brief visits, but just a chance to meet some people. And others will be drive-bys and, maybe stop briefly just to point out that we're looking at.
Well, I think what's important about this is just mental health has been a big issue, and lately it's been on everybody's agenda. And I don't know, all the time I've been here, we've never visited any. I think it's a pretty good idea that we know where our dollars are being spent and what the money's actually doing.
I encourage everybody to go. It's interesting because I'll never forget the first year that John was out and I started together, and John was out. What State Harbor is that important Whitehall that I don't know about? And I'm thinking, this is really important. These are things that are affecting our communities. They're affecting our, you look at Tony Jordan and you look at, the Sheriff Murphy, and this is all part of our community. We got to make sure that we know what's available to us from resources.
And if it's working.
And what's working for us. It's really. And so if you have time to go, I encourage you to do that.
And, if you're not able to attend but still interested in seeing some of the programs, just reach out to me, or even if you want to schedule another one in the fall or something, we can do it that way. So happy to do so. All right, then my last item was just that recognition of May as Mental Health Awareness Month. I'd like to thank the chairman for signing a proclamation again this year for us. Also included just a little bit of information in your packet. There's a fact sheet that's in there from the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And just a few brief facts I would highlight here is that 1 in 5 U.S. adults will experience mental illness, 20% of the population. 1 in 20 they will actually experience a serious mental illness. So this is individual who is, has a serious impact on their functioning.
That means one person in this room got a serious mental illness. Could you point out which one it is?
Can you point out which one it is?
Thinks about this everybody. Everybody.
You know, Bob, there could be 2 in here, not 1 in the other.
So there's some other statistics listed there, about some of the different types of mental illnesses. On the back of this, I'd like to highlight that 988 is now operational. This is a number they're using now instead of the National Suicide Prevention Hotline.
That means they're actually not.
I don't yet. No, I don't. I'm trying to get something.
Is this what this in the past couple of months?
Well, within the last 6 months or so, yeah.
We don't even know what kind of usage we're getting in Washington.
Yeah. Okay, I can see what I can get and bring to a future meeting. But now, they're implementing 988. Make it easier so people don't have to remember the long, 1-800-273-PAW was the number. Now you can just dial 988. Now 988 is also linked with our mobile crisis, so they get a call. They can also activate a local response when needed. Then also attach some information here on New York FarmNet, and I don't know if you're familiar. Everyone is with FarmNet. It's been around for a while. This was founded by the College of Agricultural and Life Sciences at Cornell University in response to the national farm crisis in the 1980s. FarmNet still operates at Cornell as part of their School of Applied Economics and Management, and also their Ag and Life Sciences and the College of Business collaborate on this. They provide various types of services to farm families, farm owners, and included in those services are some personal well-being support, outreach programs for mental health related issues, as well as all these other types of services that have to do with reducing stress and managing the stress of running the farm. There's just some informational sheets there attached with that, and some contact information, web links, etc. So I just thought that would be good to highlight those resources as well. And I had one other item, was just this open house flyer. Everyone got a chance to see that. The Addictions Care Center for Albany is opening a 18-bed residence for men at 68 Wicker Road. Serve individuals from both Warren and Washington counties. And they're having an open house on June the 7th from 2 to 4. Everyone is welcome to stop by if you get a chance. Keith Stack is their Chief Executive Officer. And again, if you're not able to attend the open house but interested in seeing the facility, no, we can arrange for something separate.
It's great news.
Yeah, they opened a 22-bed women's residence in Queensbury last year, 2019, and the plan was to follow with men's residence shortly thereafter. There was COVID and everything introduced some delays in developing the program.
Rob, is there open beds in the 22 at women, or has it been pretty full?
It's been pretty full, but they you know, they do accept referrals and are able to get people in, so.
Those large enough. Great news. Any questions for Rob on any of these things? No.
Thank you, everyone.
Tim? Good to see you. Raj?
I just have a few things, I guess, after looking at the agenda, you guys might have a quick meeting today. That could be the curse.
I'll do your best. I'll think about
Related to state budget updates, they are starting to trickle out now. Some of the allocations that we receive resulting from the passing of the budget. I did recently receive notice that the raise the age fiscal plan submissions are due on June 30th. So that'll be something that I will help to oversee for the county. And perhaps this year could be our first year of actually getting it in on time, because I know that I have lagged with this in the past myself by missing the email notification on that. So we also have received notification for our supervision and treatment services for juveniles program, which we call STSJP. Those are the allocations that come separated, certain amount set aside for detention and a certain amount dedicated to STSJP. We are able to then shift money from detention into STSJP. The funding as the state sets it up is that the detention amount, which is $98,435, is only 50% of what the cost would be for us to have somebody, we have to put a 50% match toward it for any of the costs that we would incur by having somebody in detention. When we pull money from detention and shift it into STSJP, we are then committing the 38% match to those funds to be able to provide preventive services. So we have, for the last several years, pulled money, shifted it from detention into STSJP. Last year, we came up with a budget that ended up, I'm sorry, I do have the amount here. We shifted $78,435 from detention into STSJP last year and rolled in close to $9,000 that had been unspent from the previous year to come up with a total budget of $207,212. That then allowed us to pay just locally the $78,740 match to be able to provide that over $200,000 services. Those are the services that are largely all through the Youth Bureau and Alternative Sentencing. It provides once the money is sent to the Youth Bureau and Alternative Sentencing, it provides 100% funding for them to be able to provide juvenile electronic monitoring, juvenile community restoration, which is broken out with different defined populations based upon their age and whatever behavior it is that brought them to our attention. It can serve as an early intervention or placement in care and or act as an alternative to detention. Youth employment, parenting skills, community services, why try, strengthening families, interactive journaling, and thinking for a change are all programs that you guys would have been hearing in the past being discussed by Mike and or Sue as it relates to what comes through their office. So it is crucial to the services that are provided to the youth and families in our county for us to be able to harness this money in this way and be able to provide it through to the Youth Bureau. So I would like to make you aware that we will be developing our plan again this year and certainly would like to continue in shifting those funds in that way. Our budget is already built with the assumption that the funding would come through and that we would continue to do the match, and similarly as we have, it would continue to be a local share of at least 78,000 going towards these services. The other thing for you to know about that though is that we then decrease the amount of funding that's left in detention. If a youth were to be placed in detention and then have a capped amount that we are able to draw the 50% match from. So our goal is to never have a child go to detention, never have a child go to placement.
But we can't always control that.
We cannot always control that, but we can do an awful lot collectively as the parts of our system or the parts of our county government that touch the system in this way, shift them towards these other programs.
Really kind of exemplifies the importance of the department working together.
Yes. The other thing that I don't have any formal guidance on it yet, but the thing that's come through the budget at this point that's causing me concern is we were told as a group of commissioners at meetings last month or earlier this month, I think it might have been actually, that the Code Blue funding moving forward for this year, which all started out of an executive order that Governor Cuomo put into place several years ago, saying that we had to provide shelter for people that are saying that they have no housing when it's 32 degrees or lower. We need to provide structure for them. I'm sorry, I fought it for as long as I could, and then I just totally lost it with a group of people out in the hallway. Right at the very end, it got me.
We have to keep it.
Yeah. The concern about this is, of course, I've been talking to you. I've been talking to you about how difficult it is to provide housing for people, how many homeless people we have, and what that surge in our population has been like over the last year or more. Particularly through the winter, Code Blue was extremely expensive. We have been operating with that 100% guarantee of funding, but it is something that we had to go through in a request with a budget. We have overspent significantly that budget and now have the expectation we'll put in a modification to the state, just as we did last year when we exceeded the funding or the budget, and they will then allocate what is needed for us. However, they have advised us that moving forward, they are going to be doing an allocation per county. So what once was, we promise it's 100% and is not going to be an unfunded mandate. They are now saying will be an allocation based on what our past usage has been. I'm concerned about that.
So overspending though is actually going to set us up for a better allocation.
I hope so.
No.
Yeah,
no, honestly,
I do hope so. I hope that by exceeding what we thought, it's going to drive up what they give us for an allocation. But it still holds true that if the population stays the way that it has been, and continue to provide the service or meet the need in the same way we have been, we will likely exceed that. I did raise that as concern to the commissioner for the Office of Temporary Disability Assistance and brought it into perspective of it being the unfunded mandate that we had always said that it was likely to become. And I pushed back particularly around the fact that we need to have restrictions and requirements for people to abide by when they are receiving this shelter through Code Blue. Currently, they do not really have many restrictions at all. And it really results in having, I think, more people come seeking that service than truly need it. And they are a more unruly group than what really is safe within a shelter system. So, moving on from the state budget's information, I have in here an overnight stay request. I would like to be able to stay on site for the New York Public Welfare Summer Conference. That would be the nights of July 17th and 18th. The cost for attending and staying is included in the 2023 training and travel plan that I submitted with the budget this year. However, the location of the conference is Saratoga, so I do need specific authorization to be able to stay.
So, second.
Any questions? Any discussion? All in favor?
Thank you very much. I have one last item to add on. We had recently received authorization to purchase a minivan. I'm sorry, I didn't reference if it was last month or the month before, but we talked about a minivan. The dealership is no longer able to provide or meet the criteria of the bid that we were going to go off for that minivan. But there is another mini bid that we could piggyback on that would allow for a purchase of an SUV that accommodates the same number of passengers. And also, instead of having front wheel drive, would have all wheel drive. So the DPW has identified that as a reasonable solution, and we would again be able to jump off of a bid that's already in existence as opposed to having to do a new bid. I evaluated and talked with my workers. Does an SUV change anything for you versus a minivan? And it seems as if the SUV would be better.
Price wise, same.
Price wise, it's within the same.
Correct.
Yeah, I was told that it does exceed it.
I
But
think it's
phenomenal.
less than 2,000, right? Less than $2,000 more.
Oh, yes.
For the tour.
Yes, yeah. I believe, I thought it was a couple $100, but I have,
That's the SUV.
the SUV is, I believe it is, yes, a Chevy Traverse. Yep, black. Chevy Traverse black.
Things back tonight.
I think it was more just an FYI.
No, no,
Because she had already had the approval.
we already had the approval, I just wanted to make sure that it was okay. If I were driving, it wouldn't be a bad idea. I probably.
Any update on the Medicaid when they're gonna change it?
I don't have anything.
Thursday, end of Thursday, they still did that date, so we don't know when they're changing.
Nope. Nope. As soon as I see any information, I will ship it to you and to Al. Sure.
People are. It still seats.
Yes. There's not a conversation I'm in that I don't talk about.
Leverage your overlay state wisely.
Oh, I intend to.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
It was interesting, I was like, did they take into consideration all the expenditures of transportation?
Oh, yes, it's a thorough budget, yes,
Yeah.
meals, taxis, everything. Hotels, if we aren't able to have people, and actually that has been a huge expense this year, is the motel costs when people are not able to stay in the shelter.
So in rural areas, I mean, every time you just even bring them to a shelter,
Yes,
that cost has got to be enormous. I
yes.
mean, there isn't any, no.
So one of the things that was suggested to me by the Office of Temporary Disability Assistance when I notified them that I would be putting in a budget modification was, have we thought about a warming station for Washington County as opposed to relying on the shelter that is located in Warren County? And they said that they felt that that had been pretty successful for other counties. And I said that I was pretty well aware of what other counties were experiencing and knew that it had been quite a safety issue for them. Also, just finding a location within the counties that could accommodate it has been huge issue, you know, statewide where they've settled with them. The safety thing has been so big that counties have been trying to seek security to be able to be on hand through the night, and they can't even get any security companies. So,
And then when you go back to your county, placing them, you could be placing them next to a family. That is, and they're just access or other,
yeah, it's,
and so you've got a mixed bag of possibilities, which is really initiating.
yeah. Yep. Continue to.
Yeah, we noticed that the facility in 48 there is closed down. The hotel. Is that, do we want that space there? Is that everybody there?
Not that I'm, we certainly were not placing anybody there ourselves. There may have been someone who put themselves there that received services through us, but it wasn't, they were not a hotel that we were working with.
Yes, I noticed it was transient people in and out. I
We
just didn't know if that was part of the system.
I had had some conflict with them in the past.
I understand, I have to as well, so. That's why I was asking.
We're good there.
Any other questions?
The purchase of the van, did that have to be a resolution?
It was previously, or at least was through finance.
Well, that you need a resolution to move it,
No.
No, because we're just
They
changing.
Put a different vehicle. Since I-
but it's a different price, so that's why I thought you needed a resolution.
It's under.
The voice there, so.
Yeah.
Person policy is with
And I'm gonna bring up a touchy subject. And it's nothing. And I support your overnight stays, they're so good. But what is the criteria? And why, if we approve it, what's the criteria to override the criteria? I mean, I just want, I want consistency.
It's really about networking more than it is.
Well, see, then everybody should be able to go, right? So then should we change it from something to something? So that it's consistent? Yes, I mean,
Sounds like a refer to GovOps issue, we'll look at policy.
Yeah, it's something that's coming up more. You've already approved 3 to 4 probably this year.
Right, I know.
I think you have another one today as well. So I think it is something, if you're interested in visiting, we certainly look to,
Yeah.
Swing back.
change.
Yeah.
We'll swing it back.
I would like to say, as it relates to me and DSS. I feel as though if I had put specifically the locations of these conferences, when I put it on my travel and training plan, I would not have needed to come to ask about it again here. Beyond that, the reason that you have to ask is because it's within the 60-mile threshold. And then as a footnote, I will have many more staff attending this conference that will not be staying at all. I would be in a privileged position to be able to do that, but because of the opportunity to have those extra conversations that will serve as. an
and see,
assistant
that's why I waited till after,
Yep.
and I voted for it.
Yep.
It's just that I want some consistency, because if it's somebody that doesn't like somebody, then see, you're going by.
Yeah.
And I wanted the same.
You have consistently overridden the policy every time it has come forward,
It goes out.
and you keep.
So it's now coming in again. So just decide what you want to do, send it. If you want to amend the policy, do it. And then I guarantee you that 10 years from now, somebody will say, wow, too many people are spending the night.
Then we'll
Oh,
let
that's
it
good.
go.
Let's find this.
Set the decide rate.
Let's get the policy in line with the philosophy.
I think we all have the conclusion that these people talk and just like within our own system. If our own department heads talk and figure things out, it's the same when you go and meet with people in your own department. Throughout the state, you learn more, figure things out. People you can call when something pops up, say, hey, I know somebody's dealt with that. I can get them on the phone right now. Instead of having to reinvent the wheel, I can make it happen. I think that's more important than ever.
So we've merged a lot of concepts,
Yeah.
conversations. The policy discussion to me is a valid one.
How it is.
I would, right now, I would say, only because what we just proved was for her to spend, not for everybody else.
For me.
But we didn't even have any criteria. Why did we do it?
So,
See, that's all I'm saying.
so the criteria here is, back to what he was talking about, networking. So-
Yes, but we're establishing that now, but it wasn't established before.
Right. No, that's what I was wondering.
So I think it's a conversation for us to have, but have an understanding of what is an exemption.
Yeah, what he just said, that it's about first and the night, not our whole staff, whereas if you change the policy, now everybody
Whole
will
staff.
staff. That, I can see where that's.
Budget.
Just saying, get your criteria.
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to it. I'm with you.
In government ops,
Yeah, I-
I said the policy.
We can discuss this in government ops, not to prolong this conversation, but my point is, I think the policy is fine. We're laying a department heads overnight
For a
for
reason.
the purpose of hopefully having a serious conversation until about maybe midnight, with a state representative or a state official help us. Say, well,
It's the opposite way, you know how bad it looks when it's in your home turf and you don't go and stay? I mean, it's like, do they really care we're here and they're not?
but if we want to put in a policy to your point, what is considered a reasonable exception to this?
This is
Department head, social networking opportunity.
There you go.
That occur every time.
See, what I thought was that if I voted no, that would doubt it.
So we have,
I don't want one person to control something. I want a reason for an up or down. That's all.
Just look at what we consider to be a reasonable exception.
we had Sam and then Melissa.
No, I just want to point out as a former department head, I got more knowledge on the conversation with other directors of veterans from other counties afterwards. Having said that, okay, I also think it's a safety issue. We expect a department head to stay here to maybe 10, 11 o'clock with the peers, getting the education, and say, get in the car and drive.
Yeah. Because I wouldn't have, I actually put that in my email. It wasn't a threat, but it was, I won't stay.
Noted.
I understand the concern. We have a supervisor about that, which is also a safety aspect of the, what do you actually gain out of it? Gain more after hours and before hours, and you'll be doing meetings, it's just a presentation, you try to take notes on it, and then you can check with other counties or organizations. I'll just give you one example. When I was chairman of the New York State Association of County Veteran Service Officers, I had 52 counties out of the state. But I would sit down and I would talk with their directors and we would say something like, well, they're trying to see how are you going to help their senior veterans, or how are you going to help do this with another veteran? And I said, have you read about your commissioner in social services? Oh, well, we're not allowed to talk to them. Again, whatever the case was. Okay, what about Officer Easy? No, they were all in their own little silos. But when those people got to talk to somebody from the outside in a casual manner, if you will, it opened up their eyes to the things that they could possibly do and where they can send their clients to get some additional help. And we've done that for years here within our organizations and department heads. They go to social services, they're referred over or office for the agent or public health, whatever the case may be. So an agency can help them. And that's all network. That's what they gain by going to these conferences, spending hours on. I agree we have to have some controls over it, but I think we take a look at reality.
Okay, Sam.
I was just gonna add that I think probably 99% of your overnight requests within that 60-mile radius are from department head. The exception is the training that your staff undergoes, right, in Rensselaer, and you already
Yes.
have approval
Yes.
for them to stay. That's a blanket approval. So it's really not affecting your normal staff for training. Most of the requests are department heads for conferences.
I'm sorry that it went long.
I'm thinking that, Tammy, that you said you were gonna have a short presentation.
He told me,
The rest got smart out marks.
there's two more right here. I think we might have just made easier. Maybe.
I shouldn't have said that.
It's not gonna be.
That's the segue. Longer that mine will be.
So where are you going?
So, for an overnight stay request is in Albany, and it's for the Aging Concerns Unitas Conference, which is actually facilitated by the Association on Aging in New York, of which I serve on the executive board of the association. So I was asked to take the extra time to help with the registration process and set up of the conference. The dates are on June 26th through the 28th, so there would be 2-night stay, the night of the 26th and the night of the 27th. This is included in the travel and training budget for 2023 that was approved. But again, it is within the 60-mile radius.
Motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion?
Ditto.
I hope I outlaid that criteria.
All in favor?
Just a couple other items. I just wanted to say thank you to the chairman and to the board for proclaiming May as Older Americans Month, and for also giving me the opportunity to honor our two adult awardees at the last full board meeting. They were truly appreciative, and it was just nice to show that recognition from all of us. And lastly, I'd like to announce that we have confirmed a date for our senior picnic. It's going to be on July 14th at the Washington County Fairgrounds. I'm currently in the process of compiling an announcement email that I will forward to each of you that includes a flyer giving the details of the day's event.
Great. Thank you. Any questions for Dana? Thank you.
Oh, you don't hear it up. That was easy.
Okay. So, Tina?
Where you go?
Hello, everyone. So the first thing I have is just a 23-24 New York State budget update. The state is going to be receiving 7.5 million in additional funding for tobacco use prevention and control. Well, they're not going to, they put that in the budget, but 5 million of that is from the New York State Jewel settlement. We have not heard how or if that's going to be distributed down to the local level. So I guess we'll just, unless anybody else heard, I haven't heard anything on how that'll be distributed. But just so you're aware of that.
We're going by way of that. Right now, we.
Push out.
Yeah, good. And there was an increase of $1 on the cigarette tax that was also passed in the budget. The other item that was included was the budget includes changes to promote more purchase of locally grown agriculture products in New York State. So the bill would allow local entities such as school districts to purchase foods grown and produced and harvested in New York that amount to less than or equal $150,000 without a competitive process. So that was also within the New York State budget. It's definitely a good thing. I know I've talked before at this meeting about the lead service line inventory. They did pass to allow the use of bipartisan infrastructure law funding for municipalities to replace the full lead service line. And that's both for private and public sections. And it allows access for municipalities, school districts, and district corporations to New York State for loan funding to satisfy federal requirements. So those are low interest or no interest loans for that funding. And then I know one of the previous, I believe it might have been finance, there was some discussion about an increase to Article 6 in the New York State budget. What they did there, it wasn't an actual increase, but the last year it wasn't effective till April 1st. So this year it's just for the full year. So that's why there was it looked like there was a big increase in Article 6, but it was just because it's for a full year versus through a 3, because last year it didn't start till April 1st. So it wasn't a full year. So it wasn't an actual increase in our base funding. And then the next item I had on the agenda was overnight request. This is not for me. We would like to request, I believe it was last month or the month before, we had requested 2 people to attend the statewide harm reduction symposium in Syracuse related to opioids. And it's from June 14th to June 15th. NYSHO pays for the conference and the hotel stay. I'd like to request they open it up for more people to attend. So I'd like to request 2 additional people to go. One of them being one of our nurses on staff. And then the other one is Kristen Hardy from the Sheriff's Department. As you know, she handles the mapping within the department and their opioid program. So I'd like to request an overnight. The only expense would be the mileage and I think dinner the night of the conference. Just requesting that overnight.
Are you, so they're taking personal cars?
They'll take county cars.
County car.
Yep, so it'd be tolls and carpool expense.
It's beyond 60 miles.
Mhm.
So,
Um,
Every year, we receive the Public Health Emergency Preparedness Grant. That grant runs from July 1st to June 30th. So we're up for renewal on that. So we're just looking for approval to go ahead and submit the budget and apply for that grant. It's $52,099.
Any discussion? In favor?
And then under program updates, I did want to give you a WIC update. Due to COVID, they had changed to remote appointments. Because the federal public health emergency ended on May 11th, they now have 90 days waiver to get back out into the field and do in-person appointments. But the New York State did opt into another waiver that would give people the option of coming in for appointments or still doing remote. So just so you're aware, they are going to be going back out to do appointments beginning in August, but people will have the option whether they want to come in remotely or if they want to do remote or actually come in person. Most people at this point are choosing to do remote. There are certain metrics that they still have to meet. They still have to have all their information, the height, the weight, and medical information on the child. But they can still do those remotely. And that will go through 2026, that waiver. And then they'll reevaluate it at that point. So just so you're aware of that, but they will be back out into the community in August. The other issue I wanted to bring to your attention was early intervention. This is a statewide issue. It's not just related to our county. We do have a significant wait list for children to receive those services. Right now, we have 20 children that are on the wait list for early intervention. Majority of those children are in need of speech therapy, with the second discipline being physical therapy. Like I said, it's a statewide issue. The state is looking at different things, such as allowing maybe possibly speech therapy assistance to do that work. But in order for that to happen, it has to go through the Office of Professions at New York State. Every week, our service coordinators are reaching out to all the therapists. We send a wait list out to all the therapists to see if any of those therapists will pick up other children. So after we have 30 days to get the child services, and if we go over the 30 days, we have to give a reason to the state as why we haven't been able to assign that child to a therapist. And most of it's because there's just not available therapists to be able to take on those children. So just wanted to make you aware of that. We are doing the best we can and trying to find therapists to take those kids, but they're just not out there to take them. So just wanted to make you aware of that.
two questions, please. Any idea? Sounds to me like you described it as increase. First question is. Second question. Fighters. Is there an exodus of fighters due to COVID? See a drop?
Yeah, we have been seeing a drop in availability of providers. A lot of it is, I wouldn't say a lot of, some of it is the rates that they're paid. There was something in the New York State budget for them to receive an 11% increase in their rates, but it did not pass. It didn't make it through the Assembly or the Senate. So that is part of the issue, are the rates. And then as far as an increase in the number of children, do you know, Fran, if we for early intervention? Okay.
Just too early to understand what's causing this.
Yeah.
Potential
And
increase in
Yeah.
Another therapist.
Mhm. Yeah, it's really hard to find speech therapists within our area, and then for them to go to those rural areas as well, because they receive one rate for their entire visit. So it includes their mileage, any expenses they have, and it's
Can they hook up with their healthcare providers or with the schools to have for their speech therapists?
Not for early intervention. Well, early intervention, the school isn't a part of that program. We have tried to reach out to those therapists that work in the schools to see if they would do like separate. But the contract for early intervention is actually through New York State. Those providers contract through New York State, not through us anymore. So New York State has also had is trying to do some marketing as well, to try to bring on more therapists. So just not there.
Yeah, it's a so hard.
So
It's a
there's,
short space of time that these kids, people in kindergarten, can benefit from lifelong skills and.
I guess my question is in the contracting process
Mhm.
for these providers. They get to pick and choose they want, right? So there's no uniform thing saying, you know, this kid's been waiting for 5 weeks. Simply because it's been the day. It's not
Exactly.
convenient for them as a provider.
Right.
So, already. It's
Right.
goes in.
Right.
See that same thing in the senior care. He says, well, for home care. Tell them that you live in Washington County, you tell them where, you say, oh, we can't go to Washington County. Well, you know, in some places, you're 7 miles from a place you go in Warren County, it's 50 miles up the road.
Right, same type of thing. So because they contract with the state, they can go anywhere in the state. So it's not like with home care, it's like a certificate of need process. But with the early intervention providers, they can go anywhere, but they only live in a geographic area. And like I said, it costs them to go to these different places. So we could have a kid who's on a wait list for, 90 days. And because they're in a more rural area, nobody wants to go there. And it's not a first come, first served basis. It's whoever that therapist wants to pick up. It's more convenient for them. So, and that's part of the issue as well. For these kids that are on a longer period wait time. Next, I want to talk about preschool, the preschool supportive services program. I think I mentioned this at a meeting a couple months ago, but Center for Disability Services at the Prospect location, which is in Warren County, they're going to be closing their preschool program. We did have 6 children who were attending that center. 4 of them have been placed in other preschool locations and 1 has been put on a wait list. And we're checking on the status of the 6th child. We didn't have word back on that 6th child yet. Preschool is different. It's the school district's responsibility to get them placed in a center-based program. But again, we do work with the schools and try to make sure that those kids are getting placed where they need to be. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. And then with preschool, it was mentioned at one of the previous finance meetings, we are trending up as far as expenses within that program. We do have, this is only through January through March because there's a lag in the time that the providers submit their bills and the time they get paid. So this is January through March. We do have an additional 13 children from what we had in the previous year at that point, which has resulted in about $153,000 more in expenses than we were at this point in the previous year. So we do have a little bit of budget concern there, but we'll keep an eye on it and see how it goes, and obviously come back to you if it's going to be an issue at the end of the year. So.
There's another generation coming along, that's always good.
And then I just wanted to put a reminder out. We do have our Move Your Way Trails Day this Saturday down at Mullen Park. It's from 10 to 2. So hopefully the weather will be better. So, any questions? Thank you.
Okay, so in other business, we had an opioid workshop meeting. Get prepared for the July services day. So we're going to have different departments come and review what it is potentially what we could do available. So if everybody can attend, I really appreciate it. I think, was to send out a invite.
That hasn't been noticed as a meeting,
Oh,
so we don't,
okay.
or if we do, then we need to know, provide the proper notice.
Aren't you referring to the next health and service meeting in July?
Yes.
Yes,
That
all
is a
right, so not the getting ready.
No, No, that's
Okay.
just an internal
All right, well,
department meeting.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
I
All right, just making sure we're differentiating.
It's like a good plan, thank
Good
you.
one.
Good point. So, we'll see you in July. We're adjourned. Thank you.
All right, so we just can't vote.
You guys check your sound out. I don't know.
He's got money. Blew our budget October.
I think his office is the one they have.
No,
Well,
huh? Some departments require for their stuff they do.
Let me see the change.
Bill, I gotta-
Your screen.
I gotta get the presentation up for.
Coloring's getting, someone's coloring's getting as cheap as black.
Worst thing you have to say to is my use of comment.
It's not your use of it, it's just the overuse of it. I think that was right. Right. Yes, that's, I don't care about the color, I want to know the content. Is the color to take away from the content? No, that's human thinking color.
Yeah, whenever you use white. So emphasize sound of sales kind of stuff. Right, I had a question I'm gonna ask. Is that extra 1% of the cigarette tax? Does any of that go directly to public health? Is that, does it come back before everybody?
The tax was just, the state was, you're having another dollar in tax, right?
We won't see it.
We won't see it.
I didn't know.
No, the state's got a lot of things we won't see anymore. It seems to be their trend. But it's gonna cost Sandy more.
I'm on the sweet spot. Capital fund.
No.
That's the action item that's gonna be deferred to. Okay, got it. Yeah. So we'll get you through this as quickly as possible, but I encourage, please stop me at any time with questions. Don't wait till the end. If you've got something as we go through, just throw it at me or yell at me, kick me under the table, whatever. The very first page, for each of the funds, I gave you a little recap of their net cost and of their balance sheet items. So for every fund, you're going to see pages, one net cost page and one fund balance page. What's a little confusing about the graphic, even though I felt it important to give it to you, it's budget and actual, and because there's such a disconnect sometimes between budget and actual, the graph looks odd, but I thought it was important for you to kind of see it visually, not just in the trends as we go through this report. The trends are sometimes just as important as the actual numbers.
Well, it just tells us the budget officer can't hit targets, so that's okay.
But as long as he continues to do better.
Well, they sent us more money than we ever expected.
So
That 11 million, that kind of.
So the second page in the report goes through the general fund balance sheet. And this is how I'd like to see this line every year when I report to you. We've seen several years where the line looks very different. From 2019 to 2022, we've definitely improved our financial standing. Some of that has been through decisions you all have made. Some of that has been through our growth in sales tax. Some of that has been through the significant tax item that we had being resolved and finally coming through the pipeline. So you'll see some of that later in the doc. I'm going to talk about that specifically later in the presentation. But there's several items that led to that line growing to that level. And you're going to see that the general fund has an unreserved, unappropriated fund balance of $26 million. And we're going to have a conversation at the end of this presentation. It's time, once again, I'm going to hand out the fund balance policy today with my recommendations, and it's going to be homework for you to take and look over and come back with your recommendations on the 8th. I will not be insulted for changes. I will actually be insulted if there aren't changes. These are my dream items as I see them. When I get the fund balance policy out later, we bring back on the 8th, I encourage input and feedback. And would like to see where you all are at that point. The $26 million, a nice cruising level for us based on our current budget is around 20.
When,
Sure.
when you took over, tell us the state of mechanical.
Yeah.
What was the number of it? I remember remembering that. We get down nearly to 8.1 by then.
We dropped below 10 and that is really a significantly yellow, if not red flag level. We were tickling that again when
Is that the same now with we have increased, these expenditures that we're doing, these band-aid stuff that we do every year. What's our good level?
so my recommendation to the board, and you'll see that in the fund balance policy, is going to be 20% of our operating budget. So as the budget grows,
Right.
so will the fund balance that I feel comfortable having on hand. The minimum you should have always is 2 months operating, minimum. If you look at how the comptroller scores, the fiscal stress scores, you all get those even at the town levels.
Yeah.
So you'll find that a lot of my recommendations in here put us in the best position. So I've determined how he scores this, and I put us in position that will score well if we maintain those levels. That does two things, because that score doesn't really mean anything other than it is a reflection of sustainability on how you're doing. But more importantly, it is a tool for us for budget planning, not just for today. Mr. O'Brien's been pounding the drum for years that we should be multi-year budgeting. And I think that tool helps us achieve that goal. Because if you're not budgeting for just 24, you're literally budgeting for 30. So.
And I think on the unreserved appropriated or the unreserved fund balance line that's appropriated, as you can see, you got to remember what we put for the budget is the following year's, or is that year's actual as it ends up. So we put in 2.6 and 22, but we finished with 26 million. So what we put in for an unreserved appropriated, we do that to keep from raising taxes when we don't think it's necessary. We're not doing that to spend more money. We're doing it to not put more burden on the taxpayer.
And you'll
That's
see,
what that's really about.
and again, you'll see some of that later in the presentation on where things went right. We almost every year have, and you all have seen this anytime any of you have been through a budget process here. Our department heads are required to budget their staffing pattern as it exists. The problem is the more recruitment and retention problems we have,
We make more money.
and so the breakage in 22 was bigger than normal. That's reflected in some of that number as well. We have the budget for those people that we need here. Problem is we couldn't fill a lot of the seats last year. So where we might have had $900,000 in payroll breakage, we're before. That's a considerable variance in just payroll numbers. But before you take into consideration sales tax and all that.
And it did sound in the last personnel meeting, we're backing that back up.
So from right now, I'm trying to find somebody, and I can tell you from the department head, it's not better.
The whole,
There may be places in the county it's better,
yeah.
but
Slowly increasing.
yeah, we're still finding trouble finding fiscal staff that's qualified.
Well, and Roger said that we'll find an attorney.
Right, I think the specialized.
There's certain areas that are tough. Yep.
And then there's just a graphic representation of both of those pages as well. And what I did is I gave it to you two ways. This is general fund. How general fund is funded, to show you how heavily reliant we are on sales tax and property tax. And then I gave it to you a second way that takes, because in 2022, you had another $5.4 million ARPA deposit. So that kind of skews your federal aid number that's not normal. So I gave you a second chart that sweeps that number out and gives you a more realistic look. And when you think about it, so 64% of our budget is sales tax and property tax. That's a heavy reliance on those two factors.
Yeah, so strategic risk with our under reserve. You said 20%,
Yes, sir.
and since our balance point. Sales tax is that high. Is that- is that the level?
So as long as you and the budget officer continue to not throwing sales tax to the max. But right now, if we think we're gonna get 27, you all might be budgeting 25 or 26. You give me a little breathing room there now. With the reality that it could, level out at any time. So thankfully, you have made those decisions pretty regularly now.
We've always been conservative on sales tax.
When you start-
saved us, because anytime we got daring.
Right? When you bring sales tax to the max, I may get a little more
Yeah.
vagina about that.
And it's funny, the different counties, I think Warren County always builds in a 2% increase every year. Over what they had previously. Well, it can be, because when you miss by a year, wow, it takes one.
With the way that they share with their towns, they
Yeah.
can have a drastic impact, and not just the county operations, but the town operations. So some quick little bullet points to go through. The assets increased in general fund from 46 to 52 million. Mostly due to cash on hand, and there's money that's due from the capital projects. So with that, I've been working with Deb Donahue, because we are at an abnormally high level of unpaid Marshall. So I'm working with the DPW superintendent, trying to get some of that through the pipeline and try to figure out what the underlying issues there are. Because we've got over $2.2 million out in Martelli projects right now, between the Shushan Bridge and Church Street and some of that, the larger bridge construction. And the state's got to get better at turning that money around.
Yeah, it's more than just.
So we got some costs coming up, and every day that we don't have that Marshall money, my ICS investment account is at 4.92 right now. I'm losing 4.92% of that $2 million every day that the DOT is not making the whole. So it's a significant thing, and I need to work diligently.
That means they're making it.
They are.
I think we know our answer.
That might be.
And the liabilities decreased from 19 to 18, mostly due to the deferred tax revenue adjustment going down. We're going to talk about everyone's favorite issue, the deferred tax revenue, later in the presentation. There's a couple of supervisors that's every year. It's just one of those things. It's a book entry, but it has a significant impact on our reparation and our fund. The total fund equity increased from 27 to 33 million, of which 26,221 was unreserved and unappropriated. Surplus for 2023 was $6 million, of which 2.997 million is attributed to the decrease in tax revenue adjustment. So I might as well stop here, because it's the second time you've had to hear that. That deferred tax revenue adjustment, what we have to do is I have to take a look at what's outstanding in taxes at the end of the year. And we have to measure them on our books. And I have to defer those taxes. I can't recognize all that revenue. When that tax number, when that uncollected tax number goes up, our fund balance takes a hit, which with the property in Fort Edward that we had, it took a $5 million hit. And then COVID came and we couldn't enforce 2 years worth of taxes. So for 2 years, we took significant beating on the revenues that we could achieve. Now that the Fort Edward property has finally gone through the cycle and cleared all of that, there's no delinquent taxes on those properties. And in November, we had an auction on the 2019 and 2020 properties, and we're able to clear those receipts. So a combination of some of that old debt coming off the books, we were able to adjust that deferred tax revenue back in the right direction. So when you see the revenues for general fund for 22, you might have levied 32 million, but you're going to see 35 million as a revenue number. That's why, because you now get to recognize all that revenue that you had to defer. So it's a book entry, but it has a real impact on the fund balance.
Especially doing 2 years at a time.
Right. And just remember, we're doing 2 years again this year. So I would be surprised if the number it won't be to this magnitude again, but I wouldn't be surprised if the number ticks up a little bit again this year. The sales tax revenues increased by 1.6 million or 6.44%. I would be happy, and you may be surprised me saying this, I would be happy if sales tax was flat this year. If we don't see a decrease, I'll call that a win all day long. We've been lucky enough this year to maintain a little bit of growth. So the last appellate, however, had a much scarier number attached to it. Wasn't significant, but it was trending the other way. Because I've told you for 3 months now that the second quarter is going to tell a big tale for our operation. Supervisor.
Yeah, it's the threat of recession.
The problem is their fixed costs, whether it be fuel, electricity, there's actually both of those, they both double.
Right.
So there's some fixed numbers that are driving this now that aren't going back down or for some reason back down.
And with the cost of what they're buying costing more, even if there's less sales. They're
They're still having to pay as much tax because it's whatever raise they got, they're spending it in tax.
The payroll and fringe costs increased by 2.3 million over 2021 or 6.21%. But remember, that is due to the $2 adjustment on the hourly wages and the $5,000 impact on the exempt salaries that were put in place. And I think that will go a long way to our recruitment and retention, but I don't think we're all the way there yet. So we'll have to kind of monitor that as we go through. You're probably going to see more and more department heads come in and say, I need to kind of get some things in place to make their operations work. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays through the contracts. You know, I think PBA is due at the end of this year.
Up soon.
Up soon, PBA with the first two, will show the new philosophy of where we're going, I think. The county contributed $8.9 million in capital funding in 2022. The $5.9 million was ARPA funds that were sent out to the capital project, the 5-year capital plan capital project, and $5 million to the barn capital projects. There was also $2 million put to offset the cost of the roof replacement at the law enforcement center. So I really appreciate that significant contribution in capital costs in 2022. And like I said, you're gonna see me and hopefully Brian ask you again for a significant contribution, especially with the interest rates going the direction they're going. We have borrowing costs, and if we don't have to borrow for it, we probably shouldn't. We have the ability to pay cash by sucking some more of this money out. I'm going to ask you to consider that on June 8th. So just a fair warning. I have an ask coming.
And I'm gonna put it a little bit more. I'm expecting that we'll move 5 million to the capital plus whatever the cost of the voting machines is. So it'll keep us above the 20 million level.
It'll still keep me at the operational level that I'm recommending, but it will put us in a place of strength going forward with our barn buildings and the other things that are already existing in the 5-year capital plan. So that will be the ask. With that said, the next 2 pages are actually a copy of the capital plan. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I thought it was important for you to have it, see it. We've handed it out a few times, but hopefully this is a document you'll be able to refer back to. This is probably also a good time to remind you or to tell you, because I couldn't get a bunch of paper copies of this due to the printing challenges, this is already available as a PDF on my website. So if you go to the county website to the treasurer's page and the audited financials tab, you'll find a PDF version of this. So you can go back and refer to it at any time. You can refer your constituents to it if you have people that are curious about where we are. This is available on our website also as a PDF. It looks a little different when it converted to PDF, but it's the same document.
Your unfunded call, is that goal to find that funding?
When we find it is important as long as we find it. So if we can, the more cash we can come up with, supervisor, the happier I'll be. But because it's, right now I'm in a sweet spot. If my current borrowing, my short-term band right now is only 4%. And my ICS, my investment account is paying me 4.92, so I'm in the sweet spot right now. In another 6 months, I don't expect to be in that same spot. Right.
But as where's your trades, please?
Yep. And how do we put ourselves in a position of strength to go forward?
That's the fun part.
On the same page,
The 4 barn. And you've partnered with Fort Anna.
Yes, sir.
Wasn't there gonna be grant money from that? Because of the,
There is.
but you don't have it under grants, that's why
I don't count my chickens till they're hatched. The grant award was only announced a month ago. The $200,000 shared services grant,
yeah,
we only recently found out about that.
Yeah,
So
well,
that's not built into this year, and it will be built into the capital project.
very good.
Yes. No, that's a good point. There, we were lucky enough to be successful in one of our requests. Is there any questions on general fund before we move on to car?
the debt service on that, that's Fort Ann's part. On the Fort Ann barn,
Well, we haven't borrowed anything yet.
right. So that's there in case we have to, is that one?
Well, we're going to have to, because Fort Ann has to.
Because Fort Ann,
We'll be borrowing no matter what. It's just a matter of how much for each locality.
so we may not have to on the county side if we put enough money there.
Right, so if the barn comes in at 10 million and they need to borrow 6, we'll still borrow 6. And we'll have an intermunicipal agreement in place to work out the debt service. We work through fiscal advisors on the mechanics of how that would work. Yes, that would be my preference that the borrowing is for Fort Ann.
Because it has just 2 million there though, as far as borrowing.
And we also have to remember, we committed $5 million of ARPA that have to be used on the farm. Yeah, so we have to strategically make sure that we utilize those monies first. They should literally be the first monies out.
Yep.
Right, so our first 5 million out the door really should be the ARPA funds. And get them out and then. So in year one, if we're short-term borrowing, I wouldn't expect the county to borrow anything in year one, really, because that should be ARPA money first.
Not just so everybody's aware, if we don't do that, we run the risk of them harvesting back the ARPA.
There has been a recent threat.
Yeah, so we need to spend what's, we need to spend our money, we need to have participation, how it contributes.
Right.
But then we do a resolution saying we.
Yeah,
So, well, so he's in the, so I do the same, I'm in the computer too. I have to say whether the project's complete or not. So if he's put a project into the system on his being, and right now he's got what? 0%. So the completion 0%, maybe saying 5. It's 0, right? As long as that hangs there, they'll look at that going.
Those is under the tent, like, can I give it or not?
what we're hoping, Supervisor, is that there are only, well, 2 things. The lawyers, and to answer Sam's question too, it's all interconnected. The lawyers right now are trying to get an interpretation of what the clawback is, because there's a bunch of them that feel that they're talking about the money that the treasury doesn't have.
They never
It's
said
not the money
that,
that
right?
we don't have. That's best case scenario, they're talking about the money the treasury has. If they do start one diming ours, that's why I went to, at the last board meeting, you passed a resolution to commit funds. We're hoping that the committed funds are safe, even if they haven't been spent. But again, this is all speculation until it's not.
So I've got 4 projects in that category, and I committed those ARPA funds to that are 0%.
Right.
Waiting on things that you're waiting on to do them, actually, always count on.
But the fact that they're committed is a win.
No, in our forms that we, there was a space for uncommitted. It should be going in, put in, use that.
Everything should be committed.
I would recommend committing everything.
I would recommend you putting projects in, even if they haven't started.
I still can't agree.
So,
They only did that.
Yeah,
yeah, no, I've got all the projects in, listed amounts, and it's 0% completed. That's where I'm at, and that's why you're gonna get an email every year that says, you gotta do your report. But wait a minute, I did my report. No, it's for those projects that are completed.
So the quicker they're completed, the quicker you're done with your report.
I know, I'm really hoping. So we have,
What do you got for 26?
now, one of the things that's nice that I will share, and I think I shared it with last finance meeting. When it comes to the ARPA funds, you had the $10 million exemption for lost revenue, which is gonna cover all the town's money.
it didn't quite cover all the counties, but what's nice is there was an amendment after the fact that gave another $10 million exemption for, community, anything through like the HUD, CDBG type stuff. So there's another level of commitment that both our broadband and our sewer infrastructure stuff is gonna we'll tickle all of those check boxes as well. The good news is those were also all allowable costs under the original funding for Montreal. So either way, we put ourselves in, again, we put ourselves in a place to spring with those monies as well. Before I move out of general fund, this is probably the appropriate time to talk about, and I'm only going to spend a quick brief minute on it, I'll let you read more. The results of the Supreme Court case, the Hennepin case out of the Supreme Court, that's telling us now that we will not be able to keep the surplus from our auctions. So the good news is, you know, you've heard Roger and I say this for years, we're in the tax collection business, not the real estate business. So, you know, we just have to be aware that it's going to look a little different now. We'll be made whole on our liens, and then there will be kind of process, and the state will scurry and try to get something written into state real property tax. When they get it done, I have no idea. If we have our auction before they decide, I'll just set aside the surplus, maybe recommending to you that we postpone the auction at least, you know, 30 days or so, kind of give it time to work through. We'll have a more robust discussion about that when more of you are here, but we'll have some things to talk about in regards to when strategically when you have the auction. You know, worst case, if we keep the auction on schedule, whatever the surplus is, I'm just going to set aside. And, you know, there haven't really talked about what administrative costs are going to be yet. It only talks about properties on which you gain the surplus. Doesn't have any relief for us on properties that we took a deficit, which we have several of those every year. There's only usually a few properties that do well and kind of make up. If you look at my worksheet, you usually see more deficits than surpluses. So we'll be eating the deficits and then we'll have the surpluses to offset the deficits. So we'll have to have some different conversations about how that goes forward.
And that can be a thing for.
Yet to be determined.
The Supreme Court didn't say anything about residential versus commercial, so.
I would be surprised if they make it that narrow.
They didn't, so that's the rule, so now the states have to come up with how they're gonna apply the rule.
And because they're scurrying fast, I don't know how well written the legislation is.
Should we get out of the whole making the schools and villages accountable? We just say, screw it, take care of your own. Because we can incur big loss.
Towns you can. There's no opt out on the towns.
We can end up upside down and make them whole. It's not our state property.
We're in that boat now.
We need to charge back to towns for what we use.
But again, this is gonna be a brave new world, there's gonna be a whole new system set up. The concerning part for us, especially is, now I have a surplus, where does it go? But there are liens, most people haven't been paying anybody, not just us. They haven't been paying their mortgage, they haven't been paying their credit cards, they haven't been paying anything. So they've got liens coming out of their liens. And so now I'm first in line for the money, but if there's extra money, the other folks are still in line.
What's the priority after?
Who's gonna divvy that money up? Am I gonna have to divvy that money up? Am I gonna, because if I just give it to the property owner, they're gonna say, thank you, so they're gonna disappear.
My organization is proposing legislation that would make it look a lot like a bank foreclosure. It takes the burden off of me, but it puts a huge burden on the court system. Yeah. And the court will decide, the court will have to have the hearings, the court will have to decide the distribution. So it does place a burden, and by extension,
We'll still be stuck.
We'll still be
involved in it. May not be
it'll
going.
still be us. I'm off the hook, but not we aren't off the hook.
That remains to be seen, so what's gonna, none of it's gonna be.
Yeah, there
good.
might be a shit.
Right. None of it's gonna be good, it's just how bad it is. Right.
Is there any possibility of having to hold on to the surplus for a period of time? We're able to leverage that. So it'll be sitting in my bank account.
Yeah, got it.
And they have it, there
It's
is a,
gonna be in your bank account.
there, in theory, no, it'll be in the investment. In theory, there will be a window by which they have to claim. So in a perfect world, the mechanism, as we would like to see it, would have the prior owner would have to claim the funds like they do much in a mortgage loan. And there's a number of days that you have to make your claim for the money. So there are processes in place already. You don't really have to recreate the wheel to make this work. Right? So if the money's not claimed in a certain number of days,
Vegas gets it.
the old comptroller, unclaimed funds. So it would go like surplus money from a foreclosure tax.
Jesus, no wonder they
It
changed,
still doesn't come to us.
no wonder they changed it.
Well, the Supreme Court took a very broad brush approach. They just said, look, this is not constitutional taking. In other words, you're allowed to take only as much as you're owed, not.
Right.
And then they stopped. They didn't get into the nuts and bolts of then.
Right.
Okay. They just said, if you're gonna take, the Constitution said, government can't take property without just compensation. So they're saying, you're overcompensating yourself and you're doing this, therefore you only take that so much as one. And apparently only 10 states do it the way we do it, by the way. The rest of them do give back the service, but we're out of the ordinary. I didn't realize.
And there are actually counties in New York State that opted out of Article 11 and don't keep the surplus. So there are actually already counties in our state that don't do the way that we did it. So again, you don't have to really recreate the wheel. There are counties in New York that already do it a different. So there is a template out there that already works.
We're waiting.
So we're waiting to see how that.
It was coming through the legislature, I think. Supreme Court didn't get to it first.
They've tried several times.
We were thinking that decision would come out sometime in the US, sometime in July, and actually came along earlier. And truthfully, there were three justices who were in favor of blowing up the whole real property tax thing altogether and saying you can't.
That's the silver lining.
People's land.
Right, so that's the silver lining.
It was only 2 justices away from blowing up the whole system. So.
I'm sure just Supervisor had, that's presented a resolution already.
So the other semi-related item is it continues to gain steam and will at some point pass. They want to change the interest and penalties amount, right? Because right now it's a 5% penalty on April 1st and then 1% a month. So in year one, you're going to pay 17% penalty on your delinquent taxes. They're looking to change that number drastically.
Up or down,
Yeah.
rise with interest rates up because they might have to raise them to keep up.
Again, they're trying to relieve some of the burden on the taxpayer, right? The other thing that they're looking to do, and while not all of my peers agree with me, they also would like to go back to being able to pay the oldest one first. Again, I am in the tax collection business, not the real estate business. If you can only come up with 1 year, I don't care if it's the oldest year. If every year I get a year's taxes from you, I don't care which year it is. So the reversal of the order, so the big argument is, well, they're always gonna be 3 years behind. Okay, but every year I'm gonna get a year's worth of taxes,
What they're paying.
but they're paying. So it does 2 things. It may actually improve my cash flow. The people who aren't paying might pay. And number 2, we're gonna be able to keep people under properties, which isn't that the goal at the end of the day anyway? I mean, so I'm not all that hurt about that one going through. I'm just not.
And there will be some interest in that. You'll pay the price for the 3-year float.
Right, you'll still.
You'll
There's
pay
gotta
the
be.
base, it's just a matter of how
There's
much.
gotta be, yeah.
It makes sense to me.
That's the way it was for many, many years.
So
and then-
2007?
Yeah, and then they changed it because they wanted to catch people up. And that was a horrible year because they got everybody caught in the catch-up place.
People who did it
Catch up.
were like, oh,
And then, we've been chugging along under the newest system. But like Al said, it didn't really affect us one way or the other. We're getting the interest on it.
On the pie chart, do you have any idea about the percentage of what would be considered surplus? Moving forward?
So-
Like the 1 year, I can, the auction went very well. And there was
There was a farmland,
and I do, I have a,
Yeah.
and I have a chart that I can email if you want to see. I actually have, I think by now I've got 13, 14 years worth of history. So I have a chart where I've been tracking the auction liens and sales and backing out the auctioneer's, percentage that he takes. So I do have I think it's about a 12, 13 year history of the surplus monies. So
Be interesting to see what that is, because by the time
it
you
runs
spend
1 to 200,000 a year, quite honestly, when we can have an auction.
And you would think that with Roger says the devil's in the details, that it'll come back to what they allow for administration. Maybe they do allow them to take 25 to 50,000 and you knock that out.
Because if I can actually attribute staff time as administrative costs, our staff costs are actually pretty substantial, and the enforcement business, Mr. Shaw.
Yeah, like when you said we run a surplus of a couple 100,000 a year. With this law, possibly, that computes not to losing that 200,000, it's like you'd lose 300,000. Well, you're gonna lose something more than what the surplus was, because it can't be applied to the loss.
It's according to what they let them take for administration fee.
No,
No, he's right. It's not just the surplus you're losing.
Right.
yeah,
Because the surplus is actually net of the losses.
right.
So the real losses could be 300,000, but you had a $500,000.
It could actually be $500,000.
That's right.
Yes, that's
And secondly, wasn't clear, the discussion. When you reimburse water rents and sewer rents, is that still collectible as being a cost to the county? Okay,
It's part of it becomes a receivable on the county books. Yep. It just gets bundled into that bigger bill.
so we would be able to keep that.
When it's paid.
When you pay the sewer district or the water district, then that becomes a cost to the county and you get to keep that from a tax sale, right? That will you collect.
Now we do, we won't be able to pay ourselves back.
You won't?
No, we, once we make everybody whole, we can pay ourselves back
No, we'll get our lien then.
for the water, for the things that we get. Right.
And the relay.
Right, because that's. like,
Part of it becomes part of the bill.
Right, right.
It loses its identity, it becomes part of the larger bill.
Well, some of them don't bring it all anyway. Right? Some properties don't bring what the lien is. So you won't get those back anyway.
And it's more than you think, honestly.
Right?
To your point.
Yeah, I think it could be double the loss.
What order do you pay in that situation? Or do you pay a percentage? Say you lost $2,000 on the property, but you took in so much. Does so much go to the water district? So much go to tax? So what? How do you do that?
Everybody else has already been
No,
paid.
everybody's been paid, it all goes to me.
Okay, you've already paid
Everybody else.
We've already paid it.
You can't hold them up at all.
No.
And you can't use that law say, one property.
Well, we always have, but that's what they're doing away with.
That will be the biggest impact on us, truly.
Yeah, it's not a net anymore. It's by property, like Mr. Shaw said, it's really by property, not as a total.
If on 70 properties, I made 100,000, I had to give the 100,000 back. That's a whole different thing than what we're actually talking about.
Right.
To Mr. Shaw's point, that 100 might actually be 5.
Yeah.
It's interesting,
We go the other
it's
way.
like the state is looking at.
Yeah.
People,
I got a payment last week that the program is in place.
it is in place, so what happens to that, people that haven't? You paid and sold. It's not an expenditure.
They're gonna be re-levied on the town and county bill and I'll reinforce on that. So eventually that it gets through the pipeline. But I just wanted to kind of throw that out as part of the general fund, overall picture.
Stay tuned.
Just a curious question. Do the surplus you get on the sale of property, are you generally commercial properties or home properties?
It's a mix.
Biggest ones come out of commercial property.
Believe it or not, I've seen a lot of surpluses, believe it or not, on like vacant land. Because a lot of times vacant land is just land people walked away from. The lien on them, I've had liens as low as like $300 on a piece of vacant land. Because like family has just walked away from like an estate situation. That's the. So, you know, I mean, it is very random. There's usually one or two desirable properties that really sparks an interest in every other thing. Those are usually residential. Believe it or not.
And so you know where some of that money's gonna go? The local nursing.
And did you have something on your care that we didn't keep you?
No, I'm waiting.
Oh.
Waiting for Sarah.
I just want to make sure that we weren't holding you up.
Yes.
Is that everything on carpet?
So, on the carpet. So the second carpool page is the fund balance page. The unreserved fund balance in 2022. And this, you know, this is one of my, so general fund was a bunch of happiness and good news, right? So here's some of the not so good. $156,000 in carpool is extremely concerning. And you all have made what I hope is the right decision in getting the rates increased for 2023. I have seen in the first quarter a shift upward in the revenues. And unfortunately, I won't know until we get through till 2023 if you went far enough, right? So I'm seeing an improvement, but there's no way to tell yet if the improvement is actually enough, right? So another thing you're going to see in the fund balance policy is a goal to get carpool and county road machinery, those two funds specifically, and technically workers' comp too, should be self-sustaining. There should not be any fund balance appropriation of any of those three funds, right? The revenues in should fund its operation completely. One of the things you'll see I've added in the fund balance policy that I'm sure we will discuss in finance. One of the mistakes that we've been able to identify is we've used replacement money to buy new cars and vehicles. Okay. And I've actually put it in the policy not to do that anymore. Replacement money should be for replacement. If you want to buy a new vehicle that's not already in service, or if you want to buy a new piece of equipment that's not in service, that has to be new money. Now, the source of it could be grant, could be general fund, could be capital project, could be state. I don't care about the source, but please do not use fund balance money that's supposed to be replacement money for a piece of machine that's not a replacement. So I've actually tried to write that into the policy, and hopefully you embrace that, because we've acknowledged that as how we got here. And one of the reasons we got here is buying new equipment with replacement money, and then when it comes time for replacement, you don't have the money, right? So that 156,000 is concerning. The bullet pages for carpool, the assets decreased largely due to the cash flows. The liability did decrease too, mostly because they had a lot less payables across years this time. And the fund equity went from 876 to 649, but that's in total. Remember, only 156 of that was actually on delivery. Revenues were $457,000 more than 2021, but remember, we didn't do a lot of traveling in 20 and 21, right, because of COVID. So I'm not sure it's an apples to apples comparison for you, unfortunately. Well, again, we'll see, we'll know more by the end of 2023. And unfortunately, you're going to hear that repeated out of my mouth, unfortunately, a few times, because there's just 20, 21, and 22 aren't apples to apples comparisons. But I have to show you because that's the numbers. But I'm not sure that there are true metrics of where we're going, right? So
Well, is there a formula on, especially road machinery, but carpool would work the same way? If you buy something new, you said it should be new money.
Yep.
But at the same time, should you be increasing the fund because now you have additional equipment?
So that the way the fund is supposed to work, Mr. Shaw, is say we buy a new skid steer, okay?
Right.
It's not part of our current inventory.
Right.
General fund in theory should give that, how much they cost, I don't know what they cost.
And then it would
Right.
pay in
Right.
and replace
So-
itself.
We would then set an equipment rental rate for that piece of equipment. And as people use that piece of equipment, the rental for that equipment is
Right.
supposed to build up enough to replace it. So each piece of machinery is supposed to generate enough revenue to replace itself. That's how it's
So,
supposed to work.
so should there be a built-in mechanism?
Yes.
When you add inventory, you have to add something
So
to machinery fund.
once you get a chance to read through this, you might be able to answer that question. Because the recommendation is the 20% or whatever is required to sustain the replacement schedule. Right, that's the way that I have it worded.
Okay,
So as your equipment grows, the amount you need each year to fund the replacement grows. Right, so then the 20% might not be the number, right? It might be whatever a new percentage of the fund. Say you adopt a 7-year replacement schedule. Here's the equipment divided by 7 years. This is how much you need each year.
yeah,
So to your point, the short answer after the long answer is yes, you would have to adjust accordingly to roll in that new replacement schedule.
So I'll give you the worst part of that whole story, because you're really on where the bulk of
Where
this
the
problem is. The last fees the state put out were in 2017, the rental rates.
Right.
Well, everything's doubled in price in those 6
Oh, I know.
years.
There's no way that they could be.
Actually, Deb last year said, hey, I've talked to a couple other counties and they've started raising the rates internally
On
their own to make them pay. So last year, she actually started raising the rates internally so that more money goes in on that, because if you don't, like you said, if you thought it was gonna cost 100,000, it costs 200,000, there's no way you're ever gonna have money for it. Just how it works.
The downside of fixing carpool and county road machinery
Is
is
we
we're
have
paying
to put the money-
ourselves.
Yeah,
Right,
you have
so
to
it's,
put the money.
it's left pocket, right
Right.
pocket.
You have to
it
put it-
automatically are.
But the idea is to self-sustain, that's the only
But if we
thing.
can get those funds self-sustainable, but the downside is we're still paying ourselves. So in order to fix carpool and county road machinery, you have to fund them out of general fund and county road. County road is a majority of county road funding is from general fund. So at the end of the day,
You gotta have
general
an
fund is still.
So you end up with a
source of-
interfund transfer or something.
Right, so if you don't fix the rates, you gotta build an interfund transfer that keeps the fund sustainable.
The sad part of it is it's like a double.
Oh, it is.
Awful. Money in taxes, taxing them to reimburse.
The only thing that might percent would be is a state program that funds, say HHS. They costs associated with travel to do that. Right. It's, and you, the board and the budget officer took significant advantage of that in 2022. We bought a truckload, a boatload, thank you. I'm trying to think of the appropriate word for it. But we bought a boatload of cars that weren't. scheduled. Yeah, but because of the way that we were able to fund them through COVID money, ARPA money, social services, 75%, 25%.
We only paid for about half.
We were to put an infusion in of cars that should have been replaced.
Yeah.
Long ago. You know, you've seen some of the cars that she's put up for auction. And while they might not have a lot of miles on some, we're still putting 2007s out online here. It's not okay. We shouldn't still have 2007s in our inventory at any
And
Right.
Japan's have done a good job.
So I think we're getting our inventory at least to, you know, because it's safety for our employees too, right? I mean, you have to balance the impact on the taxpayer with the safety of our employees, right? There's a balancing act there. You don't want to throw somebody out in a Ford Focus with a bad transmission either on the way to home, right? So kind of try to find that sweet spot, and we were able to make an investment in 22.
It's interesting to think about that for the carpool, because watching all of the cars come in, you gotta maintain them.
Yes.
And so that cycle, like we're talking about 2034, we're gonna be able to do that again, 8 years from now. So how do you build that in so that you have that?
And I have a promise from the budget officer that as long as he has something to say about it, because again, if we bought 13 cars this year, in theory, all 13 would be due for replacement in the same year. He's promised that they will try to find a way to stagger them a little bit so that because that's not sustainable, right? So we're gonna find a way to kind of trickle their replacements back in.
Short answer is yes, there are very
solid systemic ways of maintaining this program. Challenge we have is the startup cost. It's going.
Yeah.
And there have been some, well, we got lucky.
We got really lucky.
But we still have to commit to the rest of it.
Right.
And there are some supervisors who just not willing to commit to it.
Right, well, we just need enough to get the one more. So, all right.
And it's really, and those are in three categories: the carpool, road machinery, and the capital plan. Those are the three that you've got to commit money to pay your actual costs.
And it's painful. It's painful.
I agree.
And
Well, that's you do.
The longer you shut it off, like has been done here.
there's a cost of kicking the can.
Well, the bigger problem is like, look at the truck was what, 2.25?
Now we're 330.
Now we're 330 and headed to 400. I mean, it's hard to build in that cost because you don't know where it's going.
So the next carpool slide, you actually see what carpool bought with the $786,000 last year. So just remember that list is not inclusive of what we bought out of the general fund. Okay,
From grandma.
so in the social services budget, we spent another $50,000 in vehicles. And in ADRC, we spent another $250,000 in vehicles on top of the 786 that you're seeing. And we spent $536,000 in road machinery, most of which was a new grade all, right? So countywide, we actually spent $1.6 million in new vehicles. Now, remember, that doesn't include another $1.2 million in plow trucks that weren't delivered until and paid for until 2023. So that $1.6 million would have actually been 2.8 had the trucks come in on time. So there was 2021 trucks that weren't paid for in 2023. So usually you have, like 1 year in every year. In 2023, you're going to see 2 years worth of plow trucks. You're going to see about $2.5 million in plow trucks in 1 year, which is going to be another anomaly. So when I report out to you in 2024 for 2023, you're going to see another anomaly in the county road machinery fund, because you're going to have 2 years of plow trucks. And you'll see that when I get into the county road machinery fund, I've taken into consideration the encumbrance that's out there, because you might see, well, we got $2 million in county road machinery. No, you don't, because you got 2 years worth of trucks you're about to pay. So we just created a bubble. Yeah.
Right.
So.
That was.
Well, we
because of
bought
supply
a
chain.
$500,000 paver in 21, and we used it in 22, and in audit last month, we had a $27,000 repair
On the
bill after 1 year.
Yeah.
A repair bill, nothing to do with replacement.
Yeah, just maintenance.
And we haven't even discussed what's the longevity of that $500,000 paper.
And that wasn't from a bearing going or something covered by warranty. If it's less than a year, it had to be actual maintenance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could be.
That never happens around here.
No.
And Brian, Daryl, you'll never.
Actually, we did notice because they said that it's an improper setting on the this older one.
So on the county road fund, we actually had a loss in county road fund in 2022. And that loss could have been even more significant because she actually came in under budget on her payment. So she did everything she could to try to keep the ship steering straight. And, I guess the good news is the budget planned on using 1.1 million. And it only used 489,000. So while it was a loss, it was less of a loss than you had anticipated. That's the silver lining. And it gave her some rollover money in chips that you'll be able to use hopefully this year. So in addition to the $200,000 budget increase, she'll have some rollover money too. She'll pay as long as the weather allows her.
Here's Bert's case that with bird maintenance, we didn't invest in our roads in some places. We want to do like it's under 4 miles of road. And all of a sudden you're shifting it out. So we come to places where we had to do more reclamation of the road, get back in shape. Reclamation versus.
And that's always been,
Is 4 or 5 times.
and that's always been one of the tough conversations, right? Because when we talk about how many miles of road we did last year,
Yeah.
there's so many different levels.
Yeah.
Right? There's everything from painted black to a full.
Right.
full replacement.
Well, the
Full
problem,
reclamation.
is if they've come to full depth reclamation, if you don't do the full depth reclamation, the new paving over the top won't last only half as long because it's breaking it from the underneath. I was just doing some research on 21, we did a lot of that. $547,000 to full depth reclamation, only a mile. Boy, did we get into some problems there though. That was rebar, concrete, and everything. That was 18. Yeah.
So the,
Probably cross.
you know, the county road fund has the same problem that we talked about a minute ago. Its unreserved fund balance is down to $490,000. So what you run out of there is eventually, like with small airports, eventually you run out of runway. Right, so the fund balance had built up at county road for a few years. And we've been able to appropriate county roads fund balance to try to keep the contribution from general fund kind of flattish, or at least, you know, minimally growing. With $490,000 in fund balance, Brian will have some significant hurdles in working through those numbers for 24. Right, so you're not going to be appropriate $1 million in fund balance to make 24 work. You don't have it. So that money, the only other place to get it is general fund.
Now, on your top here, you said we have a surplus of 400.
So that's a deficit.
What is a surplus and what is a surplus?
It's not getting it back. I don't have to get it back on this. It's red.
Bring it us.
What's that?
189 is. No, so it is a surplus.
It's a surplus, because it says surplus in parentheses over at the left.
Yeah. So it was,
It added 490.
I knew that she came in under budget, so I apologize. I missed it. I knew she came in under budget on the road, and she actually did it.
But that means the fund balance should have went up and not down, or am I wrong?
No, because you appropriated $1.3 million to make 2023 happen.
Right.
So,
Yep.
while fund balance grew, it took a huge chunk. That's what I mean. We've run out of runway now.
Yes.
That the ships,
Well,
unless
if you remember. when
she
we were
doesn't
doing-
use the 1.3.
Yeah, when we were doing this, we were trying to figure out where we're at.
So they're good. I mean, there's still a potential silver lining. Out of the 1.3 that we think we're going to use this year, you might use 0. Then the discussion is different, right? I think you'll use some. It's almost impossible not to use something.
I'd like those terms significant.
So county roads assets decreased by 358,000, mostly as cash and state aid. The chip, snow, and ice payments normally received in November, are not received until 2023. So the fund, again, it's a little hard to give you an apples to apples comparison because money that normally flows every November came in January. So it makes the books look a little different than normal. It's not bad because they're both an asset, right? The cash people, both an asset, but the books look very different when you say, geez, where's all my cash? And again, we're running into that same problem in general fund with Michelle. The salary and fringe costs grew only 1.53% of 2021. So again, even though we had union contracts that settled and $2 an hour raises and stuff, because of the amount of vacancies that she had during the year and retirements, where you have a 30-year employee that's replaced by a year one employee, there's significant deltas in the payroll. So while general fund saw a 6.5% increase or whatever it was, these guys only saw about a 1.5 because there was that much difference in what she could actually staff. So hopefully she's got some better luck again. Get some of her highway tools and stuff staff. County road machinery. Again, fund balance is at 475,000, which isn't an extremely terrible number. It's probably on the lower side of acceptable. And like we discussed, the county road machinery, I'm asking the fund balance policy is going to address not buying new machines with replacement money, just like the cardboard one. The assets increased by $1.9 million, which was mostly the cash that we would have used to pay for the trucks that didn't come in until 2023. So while cash looks like it was up, it's only a temporary blip. It's already gone, right? So we've already paid for those trucks, but at year end, the cash was still there.
But now, didn't we factor in? We started a new program at Road Machinery to get our trucks cycling through faster.
Yes.
And so that was an added cost, that, like we discussed earlier, we gotta find the money to get the program rolling, and
Yes,
once
sir.
you get it rolling, it's better. So this one program we did get rolling,
Yes, sir.
and it added the cost, so
Yes.
in some, you don't wanna confuse it with being out of control, because we knew when we did it that we were gonna increase.
And we did prime this fund with general fund money
Oh, I know.
when that began. And I think we've made 2 infusions actually into this fund. I think we cured $1 million in, that's the second time.
Yeah.
And I don't remember if it's this summer or next summer, but we're close to getting in the first year of the new trucks cycling out.
Right.
So that's gonna start giving us some metrics on if we were right, that those trucks are gonna bring significantly more at auction.
Now, have we got a way, and at the time when we did this, we said, well, we're gonna track this, and after X number of years, we're gonna see what it saved us. And was there an advantage to it? So, yeah, that's still being tracked, where we'll have that.
Because it's not just the amount that we're gonna get at auction for the trucks as we
Right.
sell them. We're supposed to be seeing a significant decrease, I think we already are, in the maintenance costs. And we'll be able to measure that for you, as we get into years 8 and 9 of the program. I know that seems like a long time, but that's when you're gonna start really seeing the fruit of that decision.
The sad part of that is, when you think how bad the prices have gone up,
Right.
the vehicle that you sell for, I think you can get 100,000 out of it,
Yeah.
and now 350 or 400.
And that,
You still gonna be paying,
You're getting-
no, but you're gonna pay what you were paying back when you were paying 2 1/4. It's gonna be the difference money instead of the, that's, yeah,
So it's gonna still be accurate.
it's still gonna be
well,
tough.
that's what's gonna be an interesting metrics, right? Because
Yeah.
when you develop this program, I don't think any of us anticipated a $330,000 replacement cost.
Not that quick.
So I think it's going to be interesting to see what the metric actually looks like. Because if you're paying $100,000 more in the truck, but the resale is, $5,000 more. And you don't have the payback on the maintenance, then you talk about.
It's gonna skew it
It's
completely.
gonna skew it, and then you say, well, the replacement should be 8 years instead of 7. Right? So instead of buying 5 trucks a year, you buy 4 trucks. Right? So this is gonna be a fluid program, or you may have to make some adjustments along the way to find that spot that actually,
Just wait till you have to go to electric trucks, and you gotta trade them in 2 years earlier.
as soon as they give me a grid that can support them, we'll talk about that.
Yeah, they keep changing the rules on that too, this could be an area that never sees any of that, because wasn't their line was, if the grid doesn't support it, it's not applicable, and it's like, well, okay, I don't think Washington County's gonna have a grid that's gonna support that, so we could be lucky.
Exactly what we're gonna go for electric car.
What's that?
Exactly what we're gonna go for electric cars.
Well,
Quickly.
you just lost significant maintenance savings,
So
that's all.
the equipment purchases, like I said, were 536,000, most of which was the grade all. But the thing to remember is there was a $1.2 million encumbrance, right? And I mentioned that earlier. So that, again, it's hard to give you a true measurement because it's not apples to apples. 536 was actually 1.8, right? Because there should have been a cost of those trucks in 22 that just didn't happen until 2023.
And no way I want to offend, but I have to.
Understood.
Do you think that?
You're a couple minutes late.
Last of delivery?
Oh, exactly,
Ordering out,
yeah,
a year and a half ahead of time, gonna impact.
we're ordering in December now.
Right.
I don't know that we can do anything different.
We're trying to beat the
The
price changes.
manufacturers can only do what they can do, right? So it's, it'll be interesting.
It's a different variable.
And I don't know that even if the cost of materials goes down, I don't know that we'll see the cost of the truck go down.
Right.
You know, I mean, you may see it stabilize, but I don't think you'll get a break, right? So, is there any questions about kind of machinery for sewer 1 and sewer 2? I won't spend a lot of time on. They kind of are what they are. They're a separate organization. The only thing that I really know with sewer 1 is they have some significant hurdles coming up with their capital replacement. They're going to have to borrow. There's no way that they're not. And how that cost of borrowing gets passed on to their ratepayers is I think going to be the hurdle. But, right, so you've heard Joe and Jason both talk to the board about the hopeful thing for the users of the park is that right now there's so much I&I that they're being billed for by Queensbury, because all that discharge goes from sewer 1, Queensbury to go to Glens Falls. So if they can get the I&I down, the bill from Queensbury goes down. So while the ratepayers may have an increase in capital costs for the replacement, they should see a significant decrease. Don't see a significant burden, because what the debt service increases, they're hoping they'll see some kind of corresponding decrease on the O&Ms. So stay tuned for more on that, but
They just need a good new leader.
yeah. Right.
Hopefully we got one coming.
Sewer District 1 was.
And honestly, sewer district 2 had some significant financial hurdles before Joe. He come a long way.
No, I think Joe brought it a long way, but he borrowed for one reason, Jason spent for another, so I don't know how that's gonna mesh out with the new guy when he figures that out.
Well, while it wasn't fun for ratepayers, of which I am one, Joe did make some hard decisions that were necessary. We were in the red. The reserve money was floating operations when Joe took over. And now operations is actually self-supporting itself and actually built up a little bit. You look at sewer district 2, they actually have a $569,000 fund balance. And it was after a pretty bad year. Now, the downside is their capital reserve has decreased significantly. Most of what happened to them in 22 was capital, right? So they had over $1 million in capital. That's down to 300,000. Is there any questions on sewer districts? Like I said, I'm not going to spend a lot of time there because you hear that conversation from Joe, and they have their own board of commissioners, and you're kind of aware of the things that are hurdles in those two funds.
Hopefully, I want to hear is how to get rid of it.
There are ways. So the next one,
I don't think it's worth done. Manage your own operations.
or the next one that I want to talk about is the self-insurance, health insurance. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but I will bring to your attention that hopefully through the decision we made this year, we can kind of start leveling this up. Because we went self-insured as of June 1st, which is tomorrow. And the potential savings, and it might be a conservative number, about $536,000-ish. So we'll see. We had seen, claims are up. There's still not a way for us to really measure how much of that was deferred claims from, I hate saying COVID, it's still 3 years later, but it's still an impact on the healthcare industry, because a lot of voluntary and unnecessary, I shouldn't say unnecessary, but some of the stuff that could wait discretionary, right? So some of that stuff is finally coming through the gates, and they have a cost. The good news about going self-insured is, all of the rebates and stuff that are available now come to us, not to YouTube. And they're not building in, their protections and stuff. Our claims are our claims. So if we see claims going the wrong way, good news is we as an organization can make some decisions
see if there's a way that we can impact those claims and, you know, I don't know that you can knock them down, but where you can level them out pretty good. Through some investments, you know, we made some significant investments in wellness programs. They're gonna be even beefed up even more going forward. And prevention versus correction is always the key, right? Because what we're finding is some of our highest cost claimants are people that didn't have any claims in previous years. So while they think they're doing us a favor now, they're not. Because the ones that aren't going to the doctor, or the ones 5 years from now, end up being, you know, the $1 million claim, because they don't know what they don't know. So we really want to incentivize, hey, just go get your checkup. So, well, again, I don't want to get into the philosophy of the fund, but the fund right now is in decent shape. The fund balance is a little bit lower than I would like it, but I think that, you know, moving forward in the ISO, that's gonna stabilize as well. Where we thought we might be doing some zeros on the rates, we might be talking about, you know, some single digit increases, but nothing unmanageable. Again, we get to draw the boxes now, right? So we're kind of the masters of our own fate at this point. Should put us in a position of strength going forward. The workers' compensation fund is really going to be the last piece of cloudy news that I'll share with you today, because the only way to fix this fund affects all of you, right? Because we have to, and I can't stress enough, we have to stop appropriating fund balance in this, right? You did a very good thing when you replaced, we had a high cost claim in 2022, and you infused that money back in from the general fund to replace that one-time hit that we took, about, you know, just under $500,000. Problem is, that wasn't the only problem in, okay, with their fund balance down to 455,000. The way this fund is supposed to work is we should be replenishing itself every 2 years. And we've been in it long enough now that it should already be doing. And we're still appropriating fund balance, so something is still not there. Part of it is the way that we build the towns. So we're unfortunately gonna have to look at how the fund is funded. You know, when Richie Moore was here, him and I tried to come up with a plan that looked more like traditional insurance, where it wasn't claims, it was a rate, right? So you developed a rate that made the fund sustainable, rather than, oh, you had 10,000, you had 5,000, you had 85,000, right? So you developed a rate, and you would pay rate like you pay on your car insurance and homeowners insurance and, you know, and your personal one. So I don't know if any of you are open to having that discussion again, but we definitely have to look at how the fund is funded. Because like I said, the painful part of the conversation is the only way to fix it affects all 17 of you, because you all pay into the fund. The fund burdens 100% of EMS fire. That's not going to change. But we definitely are going to have to look at what the outflows and inflows are, because you all can't no more than double, right? And you have a cap of 20,000, right, is the number. So unfortunately, we may have to look at something. And remember, your workers' comp assessment comes out on your town and county bill, right? It's not something you build into your budget. It's something that actually gets levied. The unfortunate conversation you have to have with your taxpayers is it shows on your town rate, even though it's levied by the county.
That's totally missed. They don't even get concerned.
Some do. I get calls, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So it's on my cap, but it's on your rate.
Right, so.
So what happens if you tell your taxpayers I had a 1% increase, they get their bill and it's 3%, they're calling saying, hey.
What happened, but for the most part, they don't have a clue, and you can't even convince them they're paying for it.
But that is gonna have to be looked at.
Yeah.
That
When you say look at, you talk about 50%?
we may have to look at the math, Chairman. I don't know that, because what we're doing isn't working.
Yeah, you always have to infuse so that it doesn't go wrong.
And if you want the county to be the savior every time, you can have that discussion. But we're supposed to share the pain on this. So that's a hard conversation to have, because again, it all ends up as a taxpayer cost. So it doesn't really matter whether it's on my line or your line, the taxpayer is still bearing the burden.
So I don't know that it matters what line it's on, but we do need to have that conversation, right? So
I think
This is a little unpredictable.
it's, it
Well,
is.
and then we put salaries in and out, they took them out, put them back in, whatever.
And then we had.
I think
St.
they really
John's,
belong, and I don't- have we finally gotten through 2 years yet without any changes? I don't know that we have.
No, because now you got two again,
Yeah,
right? You got St.
They're
John's.
coming out, right? They're getting that fund.
Yeah.
So we took them out and brought it back in.
right, that's where they belong.
If we look at towns that have high compensation claims, other towns have very few. I mean, that penalty to smaller towns and other towns that don't have compensation costs. Very equal.
And that's where I think that when Richie and I talked about it, you could still have that reflected in the rate. So you could still be rewarded if you kept your costs, if you kept your claims down, you would still be rewarded with a lower rate. Right, so the rate would be indicative of your risk to the fund. If you've cost the fund $500,000 in the past 10 years, you're gonna pay a higher tiered rate.
So yeah, you double it when you finally get there.
So
Right, you go up double.
there could be a rate structure that works. I mean,
Double
not
till you
the-
get there.
Not, the current local law isn't broken, but it's not, we're-
Hard to calculate, right?
well, there's people that do it.
We only run over a guy once every 10 years.
Well, we got ours up to 80,000.
When they do it right. They
So-
do it twice, they ran over it once and then drove back over it again.
But we know what we need to operate the fund in the given year, right? So if we know it takes $1.5 million to operate this fund in a normal year, then how you distribute that $1.5 million is what we have to have a discussion about. But again, if general fund is going to be the savior every time, there is a logic to that. Because again, it's coming out on the same tax, right? So whether general fund levies or we levy it on the town, the taxpayer at the end of the day is still carrying the burden of that.
So you had 2 years of surplus and now you had 1 year of loss.
Now, do they,
It says here you had 2 years of surplus and then 1 year of loss.
So the year of loss was
Was when we had everybody
Because-
back in.
well, when we had a truly high cost claimant that's.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Al.
No.
I saw you all sneaking away.
Yep. If you get a chance, take a look at, the rest of the report goes through what went right, right? My favorite slide in them is this one. Right? Just a reminder that not everything is.
We have days like that.
So the other thing I did in this report, because if we don't do it during the year, maybe I should make it a focus more often. There is slides in here that go through all of our open capital projects. Just a brief, this is the name of it, this is what it's for, this is the name of it, this is what it's for. So I think sometimes we forget that Al's got 18, 28, 38 open capital projects that he's dealing with that I don't ever report back out to you. Maybe that needs to change. Maybe you need to know quarterly where we stand with some of our capital projects. You hear about them nickel and dime. You hear about the 5-year capital. You hear about the barn. You hear about the Shoot Bridge or the Church Creek Bridge. You hear about them little bullets here, little bullets there, but you don't ever really get an overview of the capital projects. I also gave you some slides that talk about the reserves that we have. That's another thing that we just don't talk about. The fund balance policy includes how the reserves are funded. Where does that reserve get its money from? It doesn't talk about where the money goes because it's a fund balance, but it does talk about how they are. So if you get a chance, take a look through the reserve pages and the capital project pages. And again, it is available on my webpage that you can go back and grab it electronically anytime. It's on the webpage as a PDF, so you don't have to have PowerPoint. And as always, you can call me. I know you all got to run, so
if you have questions or concerns, or.
Thank you for taking the time to put together. This is you put together for that, you double the.
Yeah, I'm sorry, more.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's gonna be harder for me on the 8th to ask you for $5 million, not having laid the foundation today, but we'll have that conversation.
Well, that's anything.
I'm not shy.
Walk out.
But apparently I've become prickly, so.
But I think everybody will understand that. I just think it's the time to get perfect weather. And nobody's here. It happens.
No.
What I found interesting was we always looked at fringe costs at about 50%. With the change in salaries, it's below 40%. So that's just very interesting. And then of course, the retirement bills will go up. And it's gonna send us back over 40%. But being under 40%, I don't know if it was under 40 when I got here.
What's that, right?
Fringe, you got under 40%.
So we always,
So that's
in this room, we always say 50.
Yeah.
And we're not running those numbers.
Well, but it's because we added the wages, the salaries went up, and so it hasn't cost that much.
Our salary has a higher fringe.
Yeah,
I think that's what we deal with.
But we've also
don't
done,
pay attention to the $60,000 bonus.
we've done really well containing the health insurance costs too, right? So that's a big factor in that.
and it
And
might
the
be a good way to realize where we are when we're out of whack in salaries, if we're not at 40%, you know, maybe. But fringe is gonna go up now, so it's going over 40 anyway.
So with the retirement, they prepared us, the retirement rates are probably gonna be another 1.5%.
Which is a 10 to 15% anyways.
Number was just talking about all the retirement loss money this year. I think that's. How did anybody?
It's 102% funded though.
We do a good job of beating up on the IDA game.
We could get better at it.
Now, on the ordinance, the rate is every.
You're not gonna have the.
So right now, the way that it works is you're actually billed for your claims from 2 years ago. It's a 2-year work through, where you have a $20,000 cap and your claim and your assessment can no more than double. So if you have $100,000 claim in your town, you're only gonna get hit for the 20,000, even though we've outlaid the whole 100 in the county.
Right.
So the replacement isn't happening timely because your risk is capped. Right? So we cap the town's risk, but not the company's risk. And that's where the unfortunate conversation happens is how do you bridge that? And one of the acceptable answers is you don't. You continue to have the county fund the gap. And
eventually you end up paying it all back. Your rate stays high for a long, long time.
as a town, you'll stay at a high level and because it kind of goes into this deferred bucket. You know, and each year you'll pull up some more money out of that deferred bucket.
What would happen though if we all had a problem at once? Well, that's where we'd be beat.
In the county, under your current local law, the county would take a significant impact if even a handful of the towns had a bad year.
But would it
Because
all
it's 2
come
years
back eventually?
But it comes back over like 10 years.
Right, it comes
You
back.
don't have 10 years.
Right.
That's the problem, right? Is you don't have 10 years. The cash flow is right now. So
In the last case, or one of the cases, I think, I'm sure. And set a precedent. For potential further conflicts. To the one of them.
well, and that would be 100% county cost no matter what,
Right,
because we do EMS.
and that's not that doesn't seem to be a problem to our. So,
Well, we do have a lot of claims through those two groups.
right,
And I
you're
think-
always gonna.
But I think we have ways we can help manage that as well. We don't really, we just take the claims and say, oh, it's, you know.
EMS, fire, and highway are really your biggest risk factors.
Which usually come highways.
Too. Well, why don't we just have one highway department? The entire town services.
Works great when town has.
So I got a better idea. Why don't we just
Seriously.
You let the towns do it, how to get out of it.
Well, that's what they always claim. We like the smarter way to do it.
Larger operations, be more effective.
You can plow for us.
Not necessarily, but.
We got some nice new trucks.
You know.
You have a nice shadow.
You guys have
I
bridges.
do.
Counties have bridges.
All equipment, all uniform, that's what it is. At least I use it.
Well, hey, thanks for that's a lot of work putting it together and I appreciate it. I wish more had been here, but.
And I thank you for your patience because the reason the meeting is this late is because I don't finalize it, so you gotta remember, I don't finalize with the comptroller for April 30th. Right, so I can't get this to you until after those numbers have all been washed through. So the good news is our auditors were here last week and everything was really good, so that always is gonna make me happy.
I don't think it's late because it's timely, because now it gives us information to look at what they have even in the way than we have in the past.
And Sam, that's always my goal is to make sure you have this as a tool before you kick off your budget. Right, so even though it's last year's information, I think it is hopefully useful tool in this year's.
The biggest problem we have is like you said, the timing, like trucks are now. So that all that money's there, but the money's already spent. It's, you know, so it's already happened now, but it's not in the year-end report. It just, that skews things so bad.
And that's why I felt some of the bullets were important, because I've tried to let you know, hey, yes, there's 2 million in county road machinery, but we already spent that. Don't get happy.
And it looks like our equity is way up, but our equity's already being spent.
Right.
You got all these things in the pipeline to happen, they just haven't happened. When they happen, they'll all be gone again.
One of my soapbox items is the comptroller makes me leave the encumbrances in the assigned fund. I think that's an absolute mistake. Because if I've got $2.4 million of POs out there for plow trucks,
It's already gone.
because this year I've got 2 years worth of plow trucks, right? It's, if you look at the assigned fund balance in county road machinery, Washington County's doing great. I want to be able to pull that out, you know, committed fund balance might be a better place for it, but I can't convince them that that money doesn't belong to us. And I never will, just my 2 cents. It shouldn't be mixed in there. You should know how much of that assigned fund balance is not spendable.
You think Mike Swan put this much out for the county today?
Mike's having the biggest smile on his face because he's ending his illustrious career.
That day he sat here, it was pretty telling, wasn't it?
Mike and Rob have been a pleasure to work with. I work very, very great with those guys. You know, Mike and I work on the planning board together. We've done, back when Mike was a real property director. So Mike has been a good friend of Washington County.
What are we talking about? Interest? Mike says they don't hear about our interest.
Are we done with the meeting?
Yeah, we're adjourned.